Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 5 of the Multifamily Weatherization Virtual Training Series, Planning and Launching Your First Project. So we're thrilled to have you here with us today as we continue this journey of learning, sharing, and strengthening capacity across the weatherization network. The series is designed to equip local agencies and partners with practical tools and strategies to move multifamily weatherization projects from concept to completion. Today's discussion will focus on the key steps, documentation, and field-tested practices needed to successfully launch and manage multifamily projects, from intake and energy audits to grantee approvals, quality control, and on-site coordination. As always, this work centers around our shared mission to reduce energy costs for income-qualified households while ensuring health, safety, and long-term comfort for every resident we serve. Together, we're not only improving buildings, we're strengthening communities. I want to start by just respectfully introducing our Director of Energy Partnerships here at NCAP. She is not able to be on, but I still would like to introduce her. Her name is Mia Harnos, and she leads our energy portfolio, and she also helps convene the partners across the weatherization network. She is currently away at another conference, so just respectfully in her absence. We are joined by an incredible panel of leaders and field professionals who bring years of experience and insight to the table. I am very excited. So before we begin, just a few quick reminders. Today's session is being recorded and it will be shared with all the registrants afterwards. Today's session is also eligible for 2 CEUs, which will be available a week or so after the session. And if you don't mind, please use the chat for comments or the Q&A feature for your questions, and we will address those as many as possible in real time. And you'll also have opportunities to engage during our roundtable discussions throughout the session. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Chase Counts, who is the founder and principal of Greenbound Consulting.
Thank you, Keisha. And welcome back, everyone. This is session 5 of our 6-part series on multifamily weatherization. This month, we'll be talking about planning and launching your first project. This is all about action. This is about taking what we've been learning, actually putting it into motion. We'll move from the theory into what it really takes to plan, launch, and deliver a multifamily weatherization project. For this session, you all have heard enough of me drone on. So with this session, I'm excited to share with you all that we are holding a roundtable discussion with several multifamily weatherization expert practitioners who I'll be introducing shortly. Before we get going, this session was developed by the National Community Action Partnership in cooperation with DOE's Office of State and Community Energy Programs. The opinions and recommendations shared here reflect our experiences as practitioners, not necessarily DOE's policy. So please consider this an opportunity for open discussion and some field-based insight. And before we get going, let's ground ourselves in why we actually do this work. Weatherization's mission is simple but powerful, as Keisha mentioned earlier, to reduce energy costs for low-income households while maintaining comfort and ensuring health and safety of the residents. This whole house approach means that we treat the home as an interconnected system. That's especially true in multifamily buildings where energy savings, comfort, and safety depend on the coordination across many units and many stakeholders. Most of you have probably already are familiar with myself and Greenbound. We support organizations navigating and expanding energy affordability, primarily through weatherization. My background spans more than 15 years managing teams, programs, and partnerships to make these projects real for households that need them most. And while we're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, I'm dialing in from outside of Phoenix, Arizona today. And as usual, I'm joined by my brilliant older sister, Jessie, who will be helping us keep on pace and capture any questions that come up in the chat. Many of you are also familiar with Community Housing Partners, who's been weatherizing homes since 1975. and operates Virginia's largest weatherization program, and also serves as the alma mater for Jesse and myself. Now for our panels, or our panelists from CHP. Megan McMillan leads the CHP's weatherization programs and services. She's responsible for ensuring compliance, performance, and staff development across multiple programs. And she may be uncomfortable with me saying this, but she's one of the most respected voices in the field when it comes to balancing quality, efficiency, and people management in large-scale delivery. Our next panelist is Stephanie Weber. Stephanie started in client intake and worked her way through coordination and in management roles. She's now CHP's Energy Efficiency Program Specialist, overseeing the financial and operational side of weatherization delivery. Stephanie brings a vital perspective on how the administrative, fiscal, and human sides of weatherization align to make a project successful. And last on the CHP team, but certainly not least, Andrew Safel is CHP's Senior Manager of Energy Auditing. He's truly seen it all: crew tech, HVAC tech, foreman, auditor, trainer. He knows where projects succeed or stall in the field and how to guide teams through the technical and logistical complexity of multifamily weatherization. Our next panelist comes from CETA, Community and Economic Development Association. Nick Horace leads CETA in Cook County, Illinois, one of the largest community action agencies in the country. CETA invests about $20 million annually into weatherization, serving nearly 2,000 homes per year. Nick's experience spans from remote Alaska to urban Chicago, and it seems like he's seen nearly every version of a multifamily energy efficiency program delivery available. And last on the panel, again, certainly not least, also hailing from CETA, David Gates is a veteran energy auditor manager with more than 25 years in the field. He's led large-scale retrofits, trained countless professionals, and continues to anchor his work in community service. He also runs a youth nonprofit, which reflects the community-centered mission we all share in weatherization. Before we get going, before we get going, a few logistics. So this session, as Keisha mentioned, is being recorded, and you all will receive the link and the brief presentation in this case, in a week or two. Please use the chat or Q&A box for questions. We may be able to address some questions live and maybe able to follow up with some others afterwards. We'll try to make some time at the end as well. Yeah, this is also eligible for BPI CEUs. So last thing I'll mention about today's agenda, we may or may not take a break, kind of depending on how the session goes. I think the attendees are going to get a lot out of this session, and we'll play it by ear to see if we feel like we come at a stopping point about midway through, or if we want to just power through it. And before we get going, I'd like to do a quick recap of session 4. So last time we focused on preparing for multifamily work, planning, communicating, and coordinating effectively. We explored stakeholder engagement, property prospecting, and the full project lifecycle. Today, we're going to be zooming in on what happens after those plans take shape, the launch phase, and what it takes to move from ready to doing. Our learning objectives for this session, we're going to outline the key steps and documentation needed to launch a project, identify common field challenges and best practices for managing them, and apply strategies that ensure quality delivery and long-term client benefits. So hopefully you'll see this as a bit of a toolkit for your first or perhaps your next multifamily project. So let's hear directly from our panelists. Now, I'll be serving as moderator as they walk us through how they plan, coordinate, and document projects from intake through approval. And as you listen, think about the parallels in your own experiences and your own operations. What's similar, what's different, and what you could adapt to make your next project smoother. We're going to stop the presentation, the slide deck, and that way you can see our panelists as they run through this roundtable. All right. So our first question, aligned with our first learning objective, what are the first steps a subgrantee should take when beginning to plan their first multifamily weatherization project, specifically before planning out the intake, initial walkthrough, and the energy audit processes? And I'll turn it over to CHP to respond first.
Thanks, Chase. Good afternoon, or maybe good morning, depending on where everybody is today. Happy to be on again, and looking forward to this panel. That's a really loaded question, honestly. I mean, when you really stop and think about what are the first steps to take to see if your agency is ready to take on multifamily. You have to think about so many things. And a lot of those things we've already discussed in previous sessions. Looking at your agency's capacity, trying to find the best project to get started on. I think we've talked a lot about in previous sessions that if you're just kind of dipping your toes into weatherization, multifamily weatherization, start small. Start small. That is the best advice I would give. And the other thing, and again, I think I've said this in previous sessions, I really wish when we were kind of starting with multifamily that we had another agency or someone we could reach out to that would help guide us and help us figure out all the mistakes along the way. So I would encourage folks to reach out to your peers. I mean, I know everyone on the panel is available to answer questions and help guide folks on their way. I know CHP, I know CETA, we've all done a lot of multifamily, so we've learned along the way. So I would encourage, start small, make sure your agency has capacity, and also reach out to peers that are successfully able to manage and work on multifamily that you're looking at. Like, for one quick example, I would say is like CHP, we work on smaller garden style multifamily. We don't work on high rises. We don't work on large scale multifamilies. Ours are smaller. Whereas CETA probably has a lot more experience in working on larger multifamily, larger scale multifamily. So reaching out to a peer agency that's gone through the process. I would say those are your first big steps in kind of making that dive into multifamily weatherization.
Great, thank you, Megan. CETA, anything to add?
Yeah, Chase, thank you. Megan, thank you. Megan, I want to just pick up on where you left off. First, take a deep breath. Know you can do it. Take a deep breath and know this multifamily journey you're about to embark on is doable. But at the same time, you do have to assess your capacity, and capacity can evolve at any point throughout the year. You also have to evaluate, along with that capacity, the timeline. Can you get it done in the timeline you need to, or maybe you need to phase that project to make it more approachable to get it done within your program year, your fiscal year, whatever it may be. That's a really critical component. So the capacity of your team, what other projects are they working on? And I have a lot of empathy for smaller agencies that are wearing a lot of different hats. And so that's where that phone a friend is really important. And not just another agency, you could also engage the help of a building science expert. You could get help from your state office. I did both of those things. My first multifamily project in rural Alaska, I was relatively new to weatherization. It was a 50-unit complex. Not complex work, but it was a lot. But it was a really strategic way to spend a lot of dollars. But in order to make it successful, those upfront capacity questions, talking to a building science expert, talking to another agency, a peer, and your state office. And if once you have that alignment, you've checked your budget, which is a really key piece in your fiscal year, then I think you're ready to launch and start making the next baby step on the project.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Sorry, Chase. I'll add a little bit to that as well. When you are doing a multifamily project, you have to be aware of your overall budget, because sometimes, depending on the size of the projects, they can deplete your entire budget and you won't have, funds to do smaller single family homes or, other things you need to do on your program. So you need to be really aware of what your budget is for this project, because there's times where, you can run into a lot of units and it'll eat your budget up really fast.
Yeah, thank you, David. And David, you're already getting a shout out in the chat. I see that. And yeah, we've talked quite a bit about that in the past. And one of the overarching themes, specifically with multifamily, but also applicable to single family, making sure that your program operations have clear lines of communication with your finance operations as well as your executive staff. You really need all three of those stakeholders internally to make sure that everybody's aligned and on the same page. So our next question, and I'll turn this over to Sita first. How do you approach the intake process for multifamily projects compared to single family ones? What's different?
I'll start this off. So when you are starting a multifamily project, first of all, there's a lot of information that has to go back and forth before you even start the project. Upfront, you have to collect a lot of information, but before you collect that information, you have to make sure that that is a viable project, because any building owner or property manager come to you and say, "Hey, weatherize my building." But that's not always the case. So the first step is, once you engage with that property, you have to make sure that it's a viable project. So you need to go out to the building, you need to take, and you need to assess their needs. You need to make sure, hey, there's, for example, I can do lighting improvement out here. I can do some significant air sealing. I possibly can do some, wall or attic insulation. I can improve the mechanical systems, because there's instances where people will come to you and you'll go to their building. They'll have a 2-year-old boiler or heating system or mechanical system, and they don't really meet your needs. So that's the first step. Um, a lot of our projects need a contribution. So you have to make sure that this property and the owner are capable of being able to provide those funds necessary to make the project move forward. And cooperation is most important. Sometimes you'll get tenants that don't want to cooperate. You'll get property owners that don't want to cooperate. And the main key is talking to the person in charge. You can go in and put in all this hard work, and you can be talking to the wrong people. And you put in all this work, and then once it get to the ears of the people that's making the decision, they'll tell you, "I don't want to participate," or "This is not right for me." So that's one of the first steps, I would say, that you have to make sure of.
To put a fine point on that too, but before this is all important before the intake process, because like David's saying, if you're going to invest all this time and energy into even doing the intake, when you already know either the relationship isn't going to work out, the interest isn't there, then that needs to happen first before you invest any time and energy in intake. And sometimes they can give you an indication of what the income limit is for the building or not. We've had situations even fairly recently where we actually did we looked at the percentage eligibility on a building. It did not meet the 67% threshold. So we had done the other precursors, but that at the end of the day, we had to walk away because it was not eligible.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Definitely,
Yeah, Stephanie.
definitely agree with David of putting your eyes on the property to make sure that it is a viable project, but also make sure that you're talking to the right person, because they're going to have to sign ownership documents anyway. And they're the ones that need to know what the entire process looks like from start to finish. So they're who you need to communicate with.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, find that decision maker and not somebody that's going to filter those conversations. All right, and actually for CHP folks, can you walk us through your typical workflow for collecting the required documentation once you've already kind of got that, you've established that the project is viable and the relationship with the property is going to work?
Sure. So luckily, CHP has a business development professional that starts those conversations with our multifamily prospects. And once they are interested, once he gets to the right person, then he loops me into the conversation so that I can look at intake processes. So we're checking the HUD and USDA lists to see if they're on those lists. I request the rent rolls for the property, or we communicate that we need individual applications for each unit. And we make sure that the property is responsible for getting those applications for us because that is a huge lift. And we don't have the capacity to do the intake on that. So if we do not see them on the HUD or USDA list, then we request that the property get us individual applications.
Thanks, Stephanie. Seed, anything to add?
Yes, so there is a process. If you come across a property that's HUD certified, or it has prerequisites that you have to reach, you have to have a certain income level to live in that property, you don't have to take individual applications from the tenant. So that can definitely speed up your process. We have a process where we send a demographic spreadsheet to the property management or owner. They've already pre-collected the income information of all the tenants there. So they provide the demographics of the tenants to us. So on this sheet, they put who lives in the household, how many people are in that household. So all the pertinent information. Then once we receive that information, we can determine if 67% of the building or property qualifies. Once we reach that threshold, you only get credit for funding for eligible units, but once you reach that 67% threshold, you serve 100% of the property and the tenants.
Thank you. And you referred to a spreadsheet, which can be a powerful tool, and that kind of tees up our next question. So and this is kind of shifting attention more on the energy audit component, but what tools, technologies, or techniques do you use to conduct a multifamily energy audit that may prevent or limit the need for return visits? Cedar, I'll turn that over to you first.
Yes, so the entire CETA multifamily team consists of 5 people. And when we do an audit, we approach it as a team. And we make sure that we have all the necessary tools and devices when we visit a property. So there's a number of things that you have to do. You start with measurements of the building, collecting data, look at base load appliances, look at lighting. So, and we do have specific spreadsheets that captures all this information. So that would be helpful when you are doing an audit. A typical audit book typically don't work because there's just so much information that you have to capture. And one other thing, most of the time, depending on the size of the properties that you attend, you might not be able to enter 100% of the units. So what we do is the units that there's a certain percentage of units that you have to go into depending on the size of the property. Once you get that information, then you have to kind of extrapolate and determine overall how much lighting you're going to need for the entire property, how many refrigerators, and you have to take it from that perspective. And it's not a difficult task, but once you have the right people on site, and you divide and conquer. I'll say that'll be the easiest way to do. So you have certain people looking for certain things, and that way nothing will get skipped in the process. And I know all agencies might not have the ability to have that many staff people on site. So you just do the best that you can. And like I say, it's not a difficult task. If you have that documentation, you know exactly what you're looking for, then that way you can capture all the information and won't skip anything.
add something to David's comment that, you hear, if CEDA's, we're in the city of Chicago, we're in Cook County, we have a lot of population. We can support a 5-person team, which achieves about 45% of our spend on an agency basis. Well, I know most organizations aren't going to have maybe even a 1-person team to do multifamily. So we understand that. I think David's a recommendation of bring a team is really important because a lot of it's a data gathering exercise. And you can, if you have a bigger building and you can bring a team, bring some, folks to help just write down numbers and be a second set of eyes and ears. Leverage folks that from, other parts of your organization. Maybe you do have some folks in single family, maybe one multifamily person. Bring those folks out. Strengthen numbers is always good from a safety perspective as well as a data gathering exercise. Additionally, and depending what type of building you approach, you may or may not need an engineer. And so that is also usually determined at this, after David mentioned the scoping visit, to determine what type of building is it. Does it have a central boiler system? Does it have, any sort of central hot water? That's got to be evaluated by the engineer. Most of the low-rise priority list rules kind of allow you to, as long as they don't have central systems, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need an engineer. So you have to assess those things. And the engineer piece can be scary, but reach out to folks that work with engineers and we can make some recommendations about who you could call, who knows this program, and they're going to be a really important ally for you.
If I could chime in real quick, we have a question for David in the chat, and it's from Linda Timbers. She says, David, when you get the income info from the landlord, how do you deal with the requirements around current dates? Example, if the landlord did a recertification 6 to 8 months ago, they're not current according to the contract requirements. What then?
So once you collect information, the information has to be at least 1 year current. So, from the date of intake, if it's less than 1 year, then the data you collect is good data.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, David. And one other note I see in the chat about sharing a lot of this information is personally identifiable information, sensitive data, and you definitely don't want to email that back and forth unless you have encrypted email. So we always recommend setting up some sort of a secure file transfer protocol is what the term that is typically used, but that can be something as simple as SharePoint or even like a secure Google Drive. CHP, I'd like to also make sure you have an opportunity to share some of the tools, technologies, and techniques that you use for conducting multifamily energy audits.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I echo everything that Nick and David were saying, but to speak on specific tools, there's 2 tools and 2 apps that we have found that have made our lives way, way easier in the field. And it definitely has taken it to the point where we don't have many return visits. And the big one is Company Cam. It's a photo taking app. Essentially, what we've created is a checklist for the photos that are required from the state. As we're taking these photos, it's checking off each box that that we took the proper photos. And by the time we come out of a unit, if all of those boxes aren't checked green, you don't move on. So it's just your checklist to make sure you got everything, which is really big in Virginia and in the state. They really want those pictures, and everyone knows documentation is huge. I'm sure everyone hears documentation, and what better way to make sure that you document by getting photos. You may miss a sentence you wanted to write down, but if you got that photo, you still have that. Those are the things you can bring back with you to the office, and you can't not have those. You took the photos, it's there with you until you're done with the project. And then the second one is Polycam. That's more for like getting the unit drawings. It uses LiDAR technology. You can go through a say 700 square foot unit in about 10 minutes and you have all of the square footages. We've found that to be within like 3 inches accurate. It's super, super accurate. We'll take those in all of the unit types and then come back and we'll use like SketchUp to kind of draw out the whole entire building. Both of those apps have been really huge for us, and we've definitely seen huge success, and we very rarely ever have to go back into units, and that's huge for us. The residents get real angry the more you enter those units, so we try to go in one time and get everything done, and those things have really made that possible for us here at CHP.
Yeah, and on every project that we approach, we do ask for blueprints or drawings. Majority of the time, that information is provided to us. And another data collection tool that we use a app called Raken. This has been a great app for us. Um, we use it to take pictures, to add notes. And once you take those pictures and add those notes, it uploads automatically, and you have information. You can reach back and grab that information anytime you need it.
But yeah, and David, would you mind putting the name of that app in the chat as well?
Absolutely.
Just dropped it in there.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank-
Nick.
Oh, Raken. Okay, I see it there. Excellent. Teeing up CHP for this next question first, what documents or reference materials do you find yourselves keeping within reach throughout each stage of a multifamily weatherization project? Any program notices, guidance materials, anything come to mind?
I would definitely say, so Virginia is based on a priority list. So I know Andrew keeps that close to his chest during any multifamily. Referencing, we always take a look at WPNs, our state guide, our state manual, which was just recently redone by the state. And honestly, trying to have a lot of, and Nick kind of talked about it in the beginning, but trying to have a lot of communication with our state so that they know what we're doing, making sure they know we're going to audit a multifamily, because we have in Virginia, I'll just preface that, every multifamily has to be approved by the state, regardless of size or anything. So we try to keep them apprised through the whole process. But honestly, like I said, the priority list for Virginia, for Virginia, and just because I've been doing this a long time, I don't have to reference WPNs as much anymore. After 16 years, I know most of them. But always just double checking that nothing else has changed. The USDA list and the HUD list for the eligibility piece that Stephanie mentioned, those are our best friends. Because I do want to make a caveat that if they're on that list, you don't have to collect income documentation. So that's kind of like if you're dipping your toes in, best place to start are those lists, because they're already income eligible. You don't have to collect income documentation. So that's huge. But I'd say for us, those are probably our key things. And again, it's less manuals and more phone calls with the state.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. And see the same question, documents, reference materials. Yeah.
I would add, and I'll let David jump in too, but we probably have different perspectives on this, whether the project level work and also kind of the before you start a project lens. And also I want to preface too, I know there's a few comments in the chat, some are saying, hey, in New York, we do this, California, it's this. And I think that's for sure, you all need to check your own local rules and regulations. We're all speaking out from our own lens that we're comfortable with, but that's really critical. I know every project's got to go to DOE for review, but some states have kind of pre-approval. So Illinois is one of the pre-approval states where it gets reviewed by our state office, maybe similar to Virginia. So it depends on what level of scrutiny your project's going to go under based on how your rules are in your local jurisdiction or state. So I just want to preface with that. And so Megan referenced the state manual. That's another one I'd reference. Every year there's some changes. Some are minor, some are more major. Even now the energy efficiency rating calculations or the ratings are different. SEER 2 and SEER and EAR requirements that evolve every year. Pay really close attention to that. We had a project recently. We had to double check. Like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. We don't think this product's going to meet spec. Even Energy Star requirements are need to be evaluated now carefully. And so there's those type of things. So that's really important. But also your own scope of work documentation, keeping that close to your vest, because making sure the contractors are doing what you told them to do at the outset, and it doesn't deviate as the project moves along, or a product swap out has to be made for some reason, product availability, supply chain, whatever it may be. And budget documents are something I keep close to my, making sure always making sure, do we have enough resources for this? Looking at contingency, that's really, really important. And David, I don't know if there's any other thing you want to add from CEDA's perspective.
One thing I do want to add, say for instance, we just recently had an instance where the contractors gave us specs for air conditioners. And then once those air conditioners got on site, we noticed that they weren't air conditioners that qualify. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, so use your resources. Reach out to your funding sources. Reach out to the people that might run your state. So we sent emails to them and say, hey, you know, we're searching for Energy Star air conditioners, but there are none available. What other solution can we have? So we went through the rules, and the rules say, hey, even if the air conditioners are not Energy Star rated, if they meet a certain tier level, then they still qualify. So there's always solutions. So, you know, don't just, when you get to a dead end, don't just say, okay, I give up. Just, you know, reach out to other agencies, just because there's always a solution out there. So that's one of my, you know, biggest words of advice. Just reach out and find an answer or solution anywhere you can.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response, David. And one of the things we talk about in a previous session and upcoming WAP Pro is with resource management is trying to keep the field of resources and assets in view at all times. It's easy to get just honed in and narrow viewed, but being able to step back and realize that, okay, there are other ways to continue moving forward with the project. Nick, was there anything else?
Yeah, Chase, one more thing I was going to mention, and Megan said something that reminded me. So WPNs, right? There's some guidance that came out recently about Build America, Buy America in the last couple of years. And so that's something that you could probably spend a whole session on that, talking about that. That's a requirement for DOE funds touching public projects, public properties, public housing. And so it's really important that you keep that type of documentation close to you, so you understand, pay attention to WPNs about, as you approach a different project type, who owns it, what's, you know, how many stories is it, you know, do you really know your low-rise priority list rules, making sure it meets the number of stories and unit thresholds, and common, you know, like I mentioned earlier about common systems, boilers, water heating, whatever, that may require additional work to evaluate those to make sure you're following the rules. Really, really critical. So in DOE bill funds versus DOE regular funds, you got to look at the nuances in those two different funds. Really important. And then depending, you all may have different resources in your own state. You know, we have also some utility funds we can leverage. So we got to make sure we're meeting the utility requirements, so following their rule book, right? So there's that stuff's super, super important, because you might have the best project all day long, technically speaking, but if one of those rules isn't followed, that can be problematic for you in the back end.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And you know, we're in some preliminary conversations with NCAP. Maybe we can put on a BABA or Davis Bacon or both, you know, specific webinar for folks if folks are interested. And you know, Nick, you also mentioned before, earlier on in your response, you know, keeping that scope of work and your contractors accountable to it. What does the process look like for developing the scope of work? Who's involved, and how do you finalize it?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that question over to someone who's got a heck of a lot more experience doing that than I do. That'd be David Gates.
So after you collect the data, the first thing you have to start with is utility data. You have to have a minimum of 12 months of utility data. And that's where it all begins. If you don't have the utility data, you have no idea of which direction to go. So once you collect that utility data, on our team, we have a total of 3 people that build our models. And so we have a person that builds the treat model. We have a person that organizes all the data. And then we have a person that does input, because even if when you collect all this information, you still have to put it into your database. I don't know what database you guys use, but we have a specific database that we use. It's called IWAX, and that database, it tracks our budgets, the cost of our projects, the measures that we do. Once we input all that information into our computer system, it builds a work order for us. And not only that, we use a modeling software called Treat. This is a DOE approved modeling software. So we enter that information into our Treat modeling software. And then once all the information is entered in there, it generates SIRs for us. And then that gives us a basis on how we can move forward with the project and the measures. Each one of our projects, it has to have a SIR of 1 or greater. If that project doesn't have a SIR of 1 or greater, then the owner has to contribute funds to that project. So say for instance, if we have a project and our treat model generates a SRI value of 9, then we have to go to that owner and say, hey, after we model your project, these are the measures that we want to do. We have to meet this certain criteria of 1 or greater. Unfortunately, it doesn't reach that. So you have to contribute. So say for instance, if we have a $100,000 project and we have an SIR of 9, that means that we can contribute $90,000 or 90% into that project, and the owner has to provide the additional $10,000. Depending on the size of your project, it can be a larger scale than that. So that's why I was saying in the beginning, after you get experience and you learn how to do these projects, you'll be able to kind of gauge what your contribution amounts would be. So you can go to the owner, even before you get started, you can say, hey, this project probably costs about $300,000 and we can cover 85% of it. I just want to make sure that you'll be able to, provide the additional 15% we need to proceed with this project. And that tends to get you right in the door right away. So you'll know right away if you can proceed with this project or not. But like I say, once you collect the data and you do the input, all the tools and software will sort of guide you into the right direction.
Excellent.
Let me add one part onto that. So the low-rise priority list also changes what that process looks like a little bit. There's a very prescriptive kind of set of things you can do or not, and you will likely not require any owner contribution, by following along. And in fact, some of the times we're running into owner contribution requirements. It's for large boiler system, domestic hot water, stuff that doesn't get like a really great SIR. So a lot of time on other projects where we're doing more shell work, we're going to get a pretty good SIR, and it could be very good. You might not need any owner contribution. In CEDA's experience, like that, we do have a lot of projects that require contribution to do the deep retrofits, including boilers, domestic hot water, all that stuff, or sometimes air conditioners that don't get full SIR. So that's where that comes in. But there's a lot of stuff you can do. We've done some projects, very large projects, $3-4 million projects that required 0 owner contribution. One we just finished recently. It's just based on the rules that are at the time and your jurisdiction and the type of property it is. What are you doing? That project had a ton of shell work. So that makes a big difference. Air sealing, insulation, all that good stuff gives those good SIRs, or it's low-rise priority list.
And just to make sure everybody's clear, so SIR savings to investment ratios of 1 or more. CHP folks, the same question. How do you what does the process look like for developing your scope of work? And we're more focused on this series on low-rise multifamily. I meant to preface that earlier. Sorry about that. But CHP.
I'm gonna let Andrew speak to the majority of it, but I would say, again, it's really dependent if your state has an approved multifamily audit tool. Honestly, it's really gonna look different depending on what state you might be in. For example, Virginia does not have an approved multifamily audit tool, so every multifamily that we go to that we have to energy model, it has to go to our state department and then to DOE. So we try to veer away from them because, especially with all of the changes and things that are going on, we don't know how long an approval would take on the DOE side right now. So we are primarily focused on looking at projects that we can use our approved priority list for. So again, it's going to be a little bit different depending on your state, and also like what you do use to model, or how you, like we use Hancock, for example. Hancock is the state mandated, that's where all of our information has to go to. So again, it's going to look different depending on the state, but Andrew can kind of speak to like developing that scope.
Yeah, for us, it's really following that priority list. But it really kind of starts on your preliminary visit. You start building that work scope. You figure out what the utilities available. Figure out what potential measures that utility provider may pay for, and how that kind of intertwines with that priority list. And so it kind of starts with myself and maybe a one team member going out looking at doing a preliminary assessment and make sure it's a viable property. We move on, kind of build a plan, and okay, we're going to attack this energy audit. And then it's more just as we're working through following each step that the priority list, which measures that are optional, which measures are mandatory, and just making sure that we follow that to a T. And we will typically kind of build a scope as we're in the field, compile all that information together, and typically run it by Megan and make sure that she's okay with everything, and price the job, and kind of move on from that point. It's with priority list, it definitely makes it a lot simpler. It's way more streamlined. We have done modeling through Hancock before. It's definitely a more tedious process, and you have to spend more time collecting information that the software asks for. Which is why I think the priority list may give you a better product on the low rise, because you spend more time looking at the building as a system, and the house as a system, and less time with some of the tedious numbers that you may need to enter into a modeling software, even though I definitely could see the benefits for both sides.
Yeah, and I want to spend just a couple more minutes on this first learning objective before moving on to the next. And on the topic of priority lists, so some of the audience members may be in states that have not adopted a priority list for multifamily projects. Any advice or strategies for our audience to use to encourage or influence their state grantee offices for taking steps in that direction? And open it up for CHP first.
I would, well, one, talk to your state office if you don't have an approved priority list, and then encourage them to steal. I know that sounds bad, but it's not stealing. It's already out there. So DOE already has templates for approved priority list based on your region. So it's just really a matter of going out and looking at those and encouraging the state to take a look at that and make any adjustments as needed based on the state's needs, and then submitting it for approval. I mean, I don't think it's any secret. So Virginia, Maryland had theirs approved. So our state reached out to Maryland, said, hey, can you share yours with us? It was shared. Our state reviewed it, made just a couple of tweaks to it, and submitted it to DOE. And I'm pretty sure it took less than 30 days to approve. Just because there wasn't a lot, again, the template is already out there. It's already approved priority list out there on DOE's website. So I would say, definitely talk with the state and encourage it, because it can, again, if you don't have an approved audit tool, I'm utilizing that as a preface. If you don't have an approved audit tool, it is the quickest, easiest, most efficient way to get into being able to weatherize multifamily buildings. I mean, it really honestly is. Again, there's caveats. You can't do large scale multifamilies. You have to stay 3 stories or under. They all have to be individually heated and cooled. I can't remember the other ones right now, but there's certain caveats of where you can use the priority list. So, but again, if you're just kind of dipping your toes into it and wanting to like get going, that is going to be your best route.
Excellent. And Sita, you're welcome to respond to that question too, but I also want to make sure we touch on one last question for this learning objective, and that is, how do you prepare your multifamily retrofits for success? What are some of the most critical pre-construction activities that prevent the most headaches?
Let me touch on as far as the Illinois low-rise priority list and everything else, that was handled by our state office. So I can't speak for that directly, but it has been really helpful to agencies, statewide Illinois agencies are now going forward being required to do multifamily. It is important we serve all property types. So that list is going to enable, there's hundreds of properties throughout Illinois, if not thousands of units that can be served. So it really is a great tool, but I can't speak to how we got there. But yeah, it was somewhat formulaic, but having the state take the initiative to get there is important. So in terms of the key pre-construction activities, there's the soft things you got to look at, and then there's the more technical things you got to look at. And I want to talk about a couple of the soft things, and feel free to jump in, David. Your relationships with, assessing where you are with whatever property owner, manager that you'll be working with for the project is critical. That it takes a lot of trust building to get to the point of like, okay, yep, we want to work with you. We want you to touch our asset and do this work on our property, and we're going to be stuck with it. And it affects a lot of people all at once. And so their concerns are really valid. There is often a shift whenever they're getting everything at no cost to whenever there may be an owner contribution. There's a little more skin in the game. Now, if we're talking low-rise priority list, most of the time, you're likely not going to need the owner contributions in most cases. So that's good. It streamlines things and it makes the sale a little bit better. But you also run up against, and I know David has this is too good to be true. What are you talking about? This is free. There's got to be a hook. And we deal with this in single family too. You all have all dealt with this on the phone, I'm sure, or whoever's calling in. So that's huge. So we've had many instances where we have the first meeting, David's done a walkthrough, done a scoping visit. It's like, okay, this looks great. Then we have those first conversations and we're like, whoa, this isn't going to work. I don't know. These guys seem really tough. I don't know if we're on the same page. And then after a little bit more trust building, a little bit more explanation of what this program is, how it's backed by various grants and agencies, and that this is a nationwide thing. You're not getting schemed here. That relationship tends to grow. They say, okay, this sounds like a pretty good deal. And once you get there, it could be some of your best partners going forward, because oftentimes one property owner or manager might be involved in many properties. And once you establish that relationship, it can be essential for a bunch of your work going forward, and not just maybe in your region, but in your state or multiple states. That certainly happened in our case, where we had one, individual we're working with said, boy, I don't know if we're on the same page, and ended up they're one of our best partners going forward. And we're able to be really good. We're able to serve a lot of people because of a really good relationship. We understand the program and we're able to help a lot of folks. So that I just start there with that kind of soft thing that's super important. And then there's some more of the nuts and bolts project management things that David could speak to as far as pre-construction activities.
Yeah, so I know it's a cliche, but communication is definitely the key. One thing that we do is that after we complete our scope of work and everything has been set on the table, we have a pre-construction meeting. We bring all the parties to the table. So we have weatherization staff, we have building management staff, we have ownerships, we have engineers, all parties involved. We have in one meeting. Not only do we discuss the entire process that we're going to go through, we give timelines. Everybody is there to be able to answer their questions. Not only that, what we do is once we get the project started, things can get lost in translation. So what we do is we set communication paths. So that way, A is not telling B what to do and B is telling C what to do. So what works best for us, communication, say for instance, we don't allow our contractors to communicate with property management, to set schedules, to conduct shutdowns or things like that. That goes through our contractors, bring that information to our organization, and then we take it directly to the property management. And so that way, everybody knows what's going on and things won't get lost in translation. So say for instance, you have one of the workers go to property management and say, hey, I want to turn off the water for this day. Then there's a problem. And then when that problem addresses, they're calling you. And if they call you and say, hey, your contractor shut off our water today and they can't get it turned back on, you're going to look silly and say, I didn't even know the water was shut off today. And so that way, everything that's going on in that building and everything that's happening. So if you limit the communication and you go through the right channels, that way you can keep control of everything that's happening.
Yeah, I think that's communication pathway is a great term. CHP, any pre-construction activities that you found to be particularly beneficial for successful weatherization of multifamily?
I would echo what David said. I know it is cliche, but communication is huge. It's huge. It can make or break a project. Honestly, it can. That was one of the first things I learned early on in multifamily weatherization was, and that was feedback that we got from one of the first properties that I was responsible for is, your communication or CHP's communication was not good. It wasn't and that was on me. It was totally on me because it was my first project. And I took that to heart and I said, okay, well, we need to change that. So effective communication is really, really big. Other than that, again, just making sure everybody's on the same page. We don't use contractors, we use our crews to do the work. And so making sure that between transition periods, so with us, we have an intake period, we have an audit period, we have a production period, and then we have a closeout period. So during those kind of like transitions, making sure that the communication is effective, the right people know what's going on, and that your point of contact at the property is aware of like these transition periods and timelines and things like that. So I think that's probably one of the most important things.
And another important thing when it do come to communication and know what's going on at the project, we monitor our projects heavily because it's not like with a single family home when one mistake is made, you can easily repair that one mistake. But in multifamily, if you have 20 to 30 units and they make a mistake in 20 to 30 units, it's a big time mistake. It's not like you're just making one mistake and you can go back and fix that. So you definitely want to be on top of that. And if you see something going wrong, you want to eliminate that up front. So that way it won't be repeated.
To help catch some of those mistakes and ensure that kind of proactive approach. And you can schedule a weekly check-in meeting with everyone on the project. And that's been really beneficial. A lot of questions come up. It just keeps it, you lock it in at the beginning of the project. Yep, we'll meet every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Everybody agrees that time. And it's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into our next learning objective. I think we got some good momentum, and I hate to break that with a break. So if you guys are comfortable, let's just power through it. And so our second learning objective at a high level, it's identifying common on-site challenges and applying best practices for access management, resident interaction, and liability mitigation. And since we were just talking, David, I really appreciate that you brought up the scale. There's economies of scale that come with multifamily that make it a little more efficient to work on, reduced average cost per unit. But it also scales mistakes. And so with it being both a challenge and an opportunity, or scale being both a challenge and an opportunity for multifamily projects, it may enable reduced costs for materials, for bulk purchasing, for instance. But if your retrofit design fails in one unit, it may likely fail in several other similar units. So what lessons have been learned from retrofit design failing or resulting in unintended consequences? And I have some personal experience with that, but let's start with CHP and then move on to CETA.
If you've been on the call before, you probably know my experience. Yeah, when we first started, again, kind of working on multifamily, ASHRAE was kind of new to weatherization. We completed a project. We do typical exhaust only ASHRAE fans, and we had installed high efficiency 2-stage heat pumps, air sealing, and we had a lot of issues from that. A lot of issues. It did happen to be a CHP owned property, luckily, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But our implementation of the ASHRAE, it failed. It did not work. And we caused a lot of problems for those residents. I mean, I like to be as honest and transparent as possible. I mean, we caused a lot of issues for those homes. And so we as an organization had to go back and make a lot of corrections. And I'll never forget, after that fiasco and horrible failure, that was one of the things when I'd go to NASCAS conferences and things like that. I'm like, is anybody talking about ASHRAE strategy and multifamily? Like, is anybody talking about it? It wasn't a large topic of conversation at the time. And we've learned a lot from that. And we're not just doing exhaust only, we're putting in ERVs. And again, this is for low rise multifamily. We don't deal with high rises, so I can only speak to the low rise, but we're now putting in ERVs. It's a much better way to meet ASHRAE, and we feel like a more balanced way to meet ASHRAE, and it seems to be working in the properties that we're working on now. So I know that was one of our biggest learning curves and experiences on the technical side of things. You know, you learn a little bit here and there. There's all different mistakes you make through the whole process, but that was probably our biggest situation where, I would say it was a failure, and we learned a lot from it.
And before I tee it up for Sita, I'll also plug, granted this was a multifamily project that was, our retrofit was utility funded, not DOE funds, but in this particular, I'll spare the long drawn out story, but it resulted in, unfortunately, I believe millions of dollars in damages. It was a CHP property, so we had that in our favor. It was well-intentioned. The retrofit design was backed by building science in theory. However, in practice, it would have required a perfect installation. In this case, it was a crawl space retrofit. And my main takeaway is there's no such thing as a perfectly installed retrofit. So Sita, same question.
Yeah, I'll start. A couple things. So you talk about scale, identifying issues that where there could be scale issue or how do you scale? Certainly learning from past mistakes. That's the biggest. So when you have someone like David who's got 25 years of experience, David knows a lot of the pitfalls, right? And so that's where if you're new at it, talk to somebody else about your project. They could look at it and say, we've been through this before. You don't need to reinvent the wheel or reinvent the problem. You can make a friendly phone call to another peer agency or CETA or CHP and say, hey, we got this job. Can you just, take a look at it? What are we missing? The ASHRAE compliance piece, Dan Huber also mentioned something in the chat about ASHRAE compliance. I had a good conversation with another Dan from New York about ASHRAE compliance. We had a really good conversation one of the last conferences about building type really factors in. The newer the building, Chicago actually has a lot of buildings where it makes it easy for us to comply. There are existing, a shared ventilation system. We just ensure that the flow is good. But other buildings, I know in older buildings that have been looked at on the East Coast, especially, there are not those systems there, and you have to get in. It gets very complicated. We have had to increase sizing on ASHRAE fans on the duct runs, and we've done that successfully with experienced contractors. That was one of the points I want to make: is experienced contractors can help both mitigate risk and with your scale. Both positive and negative. They can help you avoid it. They can help you think through solutions. They can be your partners. If you're crew-based, yes, you got to use yourselves to think through those. But and I'll turn over to David.
Yeah, as Nick was saying, contractors and your crews, that's your first line of defense. You can have the best materials. It doesn't matter if you don't have the right people that know how to implement. what you're doing. So make sure that the contractors are following the standards, they understand the rules, because a lot of times they don't understand the rules. And if you just say, hey, this is the way that it needs to be done, they can do it, but sometimes they just don't know. If you use the same contractors over, or you have experience with contractors, learn the staff, learn who's best at doing certain things. Take a look at when new people come on board, because they don't have that experience. And sometimes you just have to be there and you have to say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish and this is where we're trying to get to. So once you establish those rules, you tend not to run into a lot of mistakes or have a lot of problems.
Yeah, that's excellent. Let's see. So I think I'd like to we jumped ahead a little bit in our questions that we had shared internally. I'd like to go back up to the top and tee up Sita for a response first. What challenges have you faced in gaining access to units for initial walkthroughs, audits, or installation? And how have you resolved them?
David's seen it all. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So the main thing that we do is property management, they know their tenants. They know who the problem tenants are. They know who the hoarders are. They know who to avoid. They know how to approach. So we come to them in the very beginning. We say, who are your hoarders? Who do you have problems with? Who do we need to pay special attention to? When you go into that situation and you know what you're facing, it's a lot easier to deal with. If you go into a situation and you have to move furniture away from a wall to get to those walls to insulate them, if you know that information ahead of time, you can prepare. So we put out a schedule. If we have a hoarder on our schedule, we make arrangements with the property manager. Hey, since we know this is a problem up front, can you try to rectify this situation? And then we'll reschedule that at a later date, instead of showing up that day, not knowing what we're facing, and then we can't complete the task at hand. So try to get ahead of everything before you go into those situations.
Sometimes challenging tenants will come around when they see everybody else is getting this stuff, and then they'll I kind of want that stuff too. And it doesn't always happen that way, but it can happen. We've had some success with that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we've had is the client, the residents, you get there, we didn't get a notice. That's one of the biggest things. We don't argue with the residents. We always just go back to that communication we had with the property management, with the maintenance, whoever the maintenance staff is. And it's like, okay, we'll come back at a later time. And it's always, let's go back, communicate with the property manager, like, hey, did this get sent out? Like maybe one got missed, can we get this scheduled for a different day? You definitely don't want to poke the bear in those situations. It's best to just take a step back. And again, the management team typically knows. They may be like, yeah, we'll walk over there with you. I don't know how many times that I've had that where maybe they're just having a bad morning and property management walks over and they're like, hey, they need to get in here. And, by the time it's over with, everybody's laughing and you got done what you needed to get done.
Yeah, I feel like property managers, they're in a way similar to like air traffic controllers. They always seem overwhelmed and there's always a million fires they need to attend to. And I know one of the lessons that we've learned is checking their key management, how they actually store and organize their keys. We've had to spend the better part of a full business day in one property. They gave us a bucket of unmarked keys or partially marked keys, and we had to go through and figure out what went where. And by the end of that project, they wound up with a new key management system, courtesy of our operations. So next up, when David, you mentioned difficult residents, and I feel like we've all experienced this a time or two. I'll tee it up for CHP first, but how do you handle difficult resident interactions That could include complaints or even theft allegations, perhaps like aggressive behavior, maybe illicit materials. What's your typical process for addressing those?
Yeah, we actually just had an issue at a property last week where back to the same scenario, we didn't get any notice cursing at one of my guys, and I just what I just said, I told him like, oh, let's go talk to property management. Let's figure this out. Let's see what the problem is. We talked with the manager. She was like, we definitely got notices out to everybody. Let me make a quick phone call. Let's see what we can do. Within 10 minutes. That person actually came out and apologized to all of us standing in the middle of the parking lot. We just, it was already a stressful situation. We were like, hey, look, how about 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? We're going to be back here. Can you be ready for us then? That gives you plenty of time to kind of get your bearings about yourself and make everybody comfortable with the situation. And it really just comes back to communication and letting the property management and the maintenance staff handle some of those situations, because if you're going through it, most likely they went through it with another contractor trying to come in the units, or just themselves trying to get in there. So really just keeping that communication open and with the property management, kind of let them manage those situations, because they know these people's lives, they see them every single day, and they've probably worked through plenty of challenges with them before.
Yeah, my perspective is most of the time when you have a disagreement with somebody, it's because things aren't going their way or the way that they want it to go. So sometimes you have to swallow your pride, even though you're 100% right. Sometimes you have to give them the impression that they're winning to get what you want. And that's okay to do. You can say, hey, we were wrong, or I'm sorry, or next time we'll do better. Just sometimes you just have to pacify, the clients into just thinking that they're winning. And, most of the time, if you think you're winning, you'll cooperate.
I think your probability goes up on a multifamily project, that you're going to have a difficult client. Like you think about, if you do 20 single family houses, are you going to have one out of those 20 that are going to be a challenge? Yes, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 5. Multifamily similarly. And I think one serious issue, mental health. Some people are facing mental health issues and maybe live in a certain community because of their different disabilities or needs. And so, like David said at the outset, having a conversation with the property, understanding where it may not be just a problem tenant, but also like who has some sensitivities or allergies, or they're sensitive to people in their unit, or maybe it's just, and we've done work on shelters too, where there's, they just can't be there. We have to work with them to get in and out of the unit, do the assessment on a break, and really work around that. It could be very sensitive. So that is a reality. And so if you're going to do a multifamily project, just plan, there's going to be some probability you're going to have one out of, or depending how many units, 1 or 2 or 5 challenging tenants. But going into that, knowing that is helpful.
And one thing that this is a lesson that I've learned, but applicable well beyond multifamily weatherization. There's an acronym that's often used in psychology, VER. So validate, empathize, and reassure, in that order when talking to a potential challenging resident, or even maintenance staff, property staff. Validate them. Don't dismiss their concerns. Make sure that they understand that they've been heard and they're valid in those concerns. Try to relate to them in some way, and reassure them that there will be some way to address their concerns. And I think one of the last questions I think we'll have time for in this section. Multifamily projects often require managing multiple subcontractors, and many times on site at the same time. What are some lessons learned about ordering the installation operations? And I'll tee it up for Sita first.
So when you're dealing with multiple contractors, most of the time you have to make sure that they're not crowding each other's space. You have to make sure you coordinate the tasks that they're doing, sort of like don't overlap each other, because if you're insulating the wall and you have it all, masked off and everything, and then you have another contractor that needs to break that barrier, it can be a problem. Say, for instance, we had a project that we just completed. We were installing furnaces and we were doing attic installation, and we were venting the the furnaces through the roof. So we had to make sure and coordinate that the furnace guys got into the units first, and then that the installation guys had to come behind them and air seal and properly insulate. So you don't want the insulation guys to go in there, air seal, insulate, and then the furnace guys come behind them, have to poke holes through their, newly air sealed attic and disturb their insulation. So you have to take in consideration what tasks are being done and what space is going to be occupied. And then you have to coordinate with that as well.
And follow up to that, and David, feel free to respond, and then I'll turn it over to CHP. But in terms of like who's ultimately accountable on CETA's team for making sure that those processes and procedures are thought through?
So each project, you will have what we call a project manager. So that person is responsible for getting schedules, communicating the schedule to the property management, make sure the property management relay this information to the tenants, because a lot of the times the tenants don't know exactly what's going on. And, if you inform them and they know what's going on, then that way it'll be easier to deal with them as well. You want to let them know, hey, I'm going to be in your unit this amount of time. And one of the first things they ask is it okay if I'm in the unit while you guys are working? Because majority of the time it might be seniors or somebody that can relocate or don't have any place else to go. So you have to reassure them that, hey, yeah, you can safely be in the unit while we do this work. And, you have to reassure them that, you're invading their space, but, it's still their space.
Yeah, that's a great call. And CHP, same question in terms of ordering the installation, order of operations for those installations.
Yeah, it's so we typically have a project manager that deals with it if there's one subcontractor or multiple subcontractors on a project. Again, typically that's for going to be HVAC installs or electrical repairs, something like that. We did have a project where we had, I think it was 3 different subcontractors that had to be on site at the same time, because the electrical had to be done in coordination with the HVAC and a dehumidifier installation. And so that was tricky. We definitely ran into some issues. So again, it's more about like communication, making sure you're coordinating, also making sure if your subcontractors have to be in the same unit at the same time or just right behind each other, making sure that you have that project manager there that can let the next tenant know, okay, this subcontractor is going to be moving to your unit next. Because that just helps, the ease of the residents in the unit, so that they know, because you give notice and you let them know, hey, there's going to be people on site for a period of time. But if you're in a large property, they may not know exactly when they're going to be at their unit. So the project manager helped in that sense of letting the next tenant know, okay, they're going to be here in the next few hours, or okay, they're going to start on your unit tomorrow. It does take a lot of coordination and making sure that you don't have one subcontractor getting too far ahead than the others, so that, because you can't have a unit without any HVAC, or, we ran into that a couple of situations where the unit was taken out, but the new unit wasn't put in a timely fashion. So again, we ran into different scenarios like that. Some good things and some needs improvement areas.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
sorry, Chase, and we try to limit access to the units as much as possible, because there are some instances where people might take off work or they have to go to doctor appointments. And sometimes people just don't feel comfortable of having someone in their home when they're not there. So you have to take those things into consideration as well.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And that kind of tees up, well, let's move on to our last set of questions for learning objective 3. And if we have some time, we may go back to some of the outstanding questions we have lined up for learning objective 2. But in the interest of time, so learning objective 3 is demonstrating strategies for maximizing long-term client benefits, minimizing negative impacts, and ultimately generating referrals for future multifamily projects. And let's start with Seed on this first, and then CHP folks. What do you do to ensure a multifamily weatherization project leaves the property better than it started, even beyond just the energy savings?
It goes back to good contractors, good communication. I think it's setting expectations on the front end that we are first, do no harm, right? That's always our mantra, right? We got to abide by that. And it is ensuring that you've thought through each step of the process, that you are, say, for example, if you're going to poke a bunch of holes doing foam in the walls or dense pack in the walls, that we don't paint. Painting is not part of what we do. We're going to prep it for paint. So being clear with the property manager, saying, look, we're going to drill a bunch of holes. Are you okay with that? Making sure they're clear in the scope of work and that they're on the hook to paint those holes. And if everybody's good with that, then it's going to go fine. But if they're surprised or caught off guard, like what the heck's going on, or there's something additional like that has to be done that is maybe not allowable for the program, but they're going to have to deal with it. You got to have those conversations up front and think through those steps. And so your contractors might bring those concerns to you. You have to communicate them to property ownership management. And so the quality of work, your quality of contractors really matter. So for those that are contractor based, you may want to consider doing an RFQ for your multifamily separately than your other contractors. You might want someone that has experience working on multifamily properties, or you bid it on a job by job basis, but you want to make sure, check those referrals, check those, those contractors, stated qualifications, and make sure that they're there. If you're new to multifamily, if contractors new to multifamily, that's a big part of it. And what David said earlier, we monitor the heck out of the projects. Our team is there all the time, that we're catching things as it goes. So once you found one deficiency, you catch it and address it and make sure that going forward, it doesn't happen again. Or like he said, you're going to be going back 30, 40 times.
Yeah. The CHP folks, same question. How do you make sure you leave the property better than when you started?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Nick said, making sure expectations are defined ahead of time. I think that's huge, with the property owners. Also, one thing that, I feel like we sometimes tend to forget is that these residents did not ask us to show up there. And so we have a great group of crew folks and QCIs. And so I would say that our success is based on the folks that are in those units, our audit team, our crews, and our QCIs. A quick anecdote, if I just have a moment. We were working on a project. It started off horribly. It started off so bad. The property owners were not happy. Anyway, so I had to go up to the property, and it was an hour and a half away from where I was. And from the time I left my office and an hour and a half to get there, within that time frame, our QCI, who is great with clients, had pretty much smoothed over the entire situation with the residents. And I think that's making sure that not only the property owners are happy, but the residents are happy when you're done and you're leaving their unit, making sure, do you have any questions? Is there anything that you need for us to do for you before we move on to the next unit? I think that's really important, and that gets overlooked a lot of times. Yes, we are there for the property owners and we have to make sure that we meet their needs, but we are also going into people's homes. That's their home. That's where they live. So we have to make sure that when we're walking out that door, that resident is not angry, does not have any unresolved issues, is that we are leaving them better than when we walked in there to begin with. So making sure they understand if we're putting in a new heating system and it's a new thermostat, have we gone over that thermostat with them? Do they understand how to use said thermostat? So it's things like that. Again, for something that's really kind of taken a hold of making sure that the residents, when you walk out their door, they are happy with what's been done and have a good understanding of what you did and why you were there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you all. And apologies if there's any background noise. The next question, and we'll kind of tee it up for CHP, then CETA. And could you share a time when weatherization work helped identify or prevent a health or safety issue? Could be biological growth, CAS issues, carbon monoxide.
Yeah, I think one that stands out for me is one that we haven't even weatherized the project yet. The energy auditing team was scheduled to do an audit. We did a preliminary assessment, went to do the audit. Actually found out in the middle of it, ownership had changed. So this is a new ownership that's coming in. They have this property, they don't know anything about it, and we found gas leaks everywhere that they weren't aware of, and obviously the previous owners must not have been aware of. And it was to the point we had made it through a couple buildings and it was like, okay, like we're tagging everything here. Like every appliance in these units are leaking. And this, so we didn't do weatherization work, but we actually caught it on the front end, and hopefully we can go back and help that property, and hopefully they got everything fixed. That's my big hope. At least we went in there and kind of let them know what the issues were, and could have been real big problems. So that was kind of one that sticks out to me.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to CETA, I'll share a brief anecdote as well. We were walking a multifamily property while I was at CHP, and gas appliances that were atmospheric, so pulling combustion air from inside the unit, and personal CO monitors were registering about 7 to 8 parts per million carbon monoxide. And sure enough, a number of the residents that we were going into were missing work because they were not feeling well. And so we had to make sure that we let the property know about the issue and ways to remedy it. And that was before we could even consider the weatherization process. But CETA, any other health and safety issues that you've identified or helped prevent?
Yeah, gas leaks are definitely one of the biggest ones. And one of the positive things about, dealing with multifamily properties is that you have somebody on hand that can do the work right away. So if we go into a unit and we identify a gas leak, we let them know immediately. And that maintenance guy, 95% of the time, he has the ability to make that repair right there on the spot. So you don't have to shut down or kill their service and then wait for somebody to come out to make those repairs. You can do a benefit and repair that service. They'll get that service repaired right on the spot for them.
I would share two more quick things.
Yeah.
We've done instances where the domestic hot water improvements. I know David's worked on projects where it's dramatically improved their water pressure, the heating, all of it. And clients that is I would say a health and safety issue. That is a big deal in improving quality of life. Better thermostat control, those type of things, softer things, but also something that is also a risk and an opportunity when we go in the attics and look at insulation, assessing the condition of the attic. And you might find where there's been leaks in the roof. We found property recently, there's existing leaks in the roof. Well, that puts at risk the existing insulation. Ceiling collapse can be a very serious risk. If you have nailed sheetrock, where there has been water damage in there previously. And then if you put insulation on top of existing ceilings that have potential issues, you're now involved with that. And it's happened where there's been a ceiling issue on a building that we hadn't even put the insulation in at the time, but it started exposing itself. So then it was like, hold on a minute, we got to assess the whole thing a little bit closer and see what we're dealing with. But that could be a serious issue, and you do want to assess the condition of the ceiling, how it's attached, before you determine what type of insulation you're going to add in, how much, and if you want to do any other remediation measures to make sure it's not going to be a problem going forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Nick. And for the attendees, one of the reasons why I asked this question is, and I'll challenge folks here to consider these responses. These are ways that can inform your value proposition to these property owners, property managers, these decision makers. Most of the organizations, most of the decision makers, they are going to be either private companies that own these properties, or even affordable nonprofit housing developers. Either way, they're typically focused on two primary things. One is sustaining their revenue, and two is minimizing their risk and liability. So if you can pitch it so that they have maybe reduced resident turnover, maybe that's something that they're interested in, sustaining that revenue. If you're catching, and things like the water pressure and temperature improvements can improve that quality of life for the residents, maybe that translates into sustained or reduced resident turnover. And then on the gas leak detection, I mean, we're talking, that's a massive liability that if you pray that that's never found out, the gas leaks are never found out on the headlines in the news. And if you, I track several of our utility partners, including gas utilities, on Google Alerts, and it is alarming how frequently there are stories every few days, every week or so, about a gas leak being detected, or worse, being detected by an untimely disruption in service, we'll call it. You know, I'm going to turn this over to Sita first, this next question. What follow-up strategies have helped you generate future project leads or referrals from satisfied property managers?
I'll let our multifamily development manager answer that development question.
So word of mouth is like your biggest friend. If you go to a property and you do a good job, the word gets out that, hey, I got unbelievable, work done to my building. It was done by this program or that program. You should look into it. The benefits were great. They came in. And one thing I want to reiterate that, we try to explain everything to the tenants, but majority of the time, the owners know less than the tenants. So once you start to educate the owners and you let them, the benefits of, the services that you can provide, and not only how it can help the owners in the long run, but how it can help their tenants. Because that's our main goal, is to serve the tenants and, to improve their comfort. And we want to provide savings to them as well. So once you accomplish those two things, word to get out in your program a spread. Talk to your community leaders. Let them know. They'll put together meetups or seminars for you and give you the opportunity to come out and speak. And once the word get out there, it gets out there, and you won't have any problem finding clients or, being able to provide your services. And you have to realize, we need them just as much as they need us.
Yeah. CHP, any additional comments to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Word of mouth is huge. Our business development professional that we have is creating multifamily success stories every single time we do a multifamily, and he's using that to spread the word. He also goes back to the multifamilies that we've completed and uses that relationship to try and see what other properties we can use, or who do they know that they would share their information with, just so that we can generate those future leads.
Excellent. All right. CHP, I'll also tee you up for this first. How do you collect and use feedback from residents or property owners to improve future project service delivery?
I think again, kind of echoing what Stephanie said, having that feedback loop from the property, and the residents as well. What we did good, what we need improvement on, and trying to make alterations for the next project. It can be something specific as you placed your dumpster in the wrong spot, or which in reality did happen. We placed a dumpster on a piece of land and it ended up killing the grass. Again, it's lesson learned. Again, small anecdotes, but I think it's just taking the different experiences, not just the feedback, but the things that you learn so that you can do better the next time. Like I gave that anecdote earlier about, one of the first pieces of feedback was our communication was not good. And that was from the property owner. So we made adjustments to do better at that. And we continue to make adjustments. I always say the quality of the work that we do, I think is awesome. It is top notch. How we get there sometimes is where we need a little bit of improvement, but overall, like I said, I think you just take that feedback, and sometimes it is negative. Sometimes that feedback is constructive criticism, and you have to be the person to accept it and own it and make changes and do it different next time. I mean, honestly, that's really really all we can try to do. Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I take from it, is making sure that we take accountability if we do something incorrectly, and that we own that and make steps to correct it next time.
And Sita, before I turn it over to you, I'd add on to that question. How do you actually relay that to all of the stakeholders, internal stakeholders involved in that project delivery, whether it's your in-house crew, property managers, or even external contractors?
Typically for us, it's communicated immediately as soon as we know it. Because if it is a constructive feedback, those typically aren't really positive. So we communicate that immediately, depending on the situation. Overall, I would say that would be an area that we definitely want to do better at CHP, is kind of having a uh, uh, post project completion roundtable to see, okay, what went really well, what could we do different, what areas do we need to improve upon. I would encourage any organization that's wanting to get started like that should be a really big proponent of that first multifamily. I know we did it on our first few. We've gotten away from it a little bit, I think, just because of different priorities, but definitely something we want to kind of bring back to our side of things, of having that post project roundtable of what went good and what areas do we need to improve upon.
Yeah, see, the same question.
I think that's also something we could do more of, do better, more formal. All right, after action, how to go, like what do we do with the feedback? I do think informally, and it is passed along to contractors and our team as well, that whether it's, or sometimes follow up, emails are sent to say, hey, listen, this issue happened on this job. Just to be clear going forward, this is how it's going to happen. David mentioned earlier about giving clear direction to contractors. You don't communicate with property management, don't run that through us. Like those constant reminders. And then once you do one multifamily, you do a second one, you start getting into a routine. And everything builds on itself, and you get into a routine with your contractors or your crews, and start getting that flow state a little bit, and everybody knows everybody. You go to a project, you know what the expectations are. So once you do one multifamily, you do a second one, you're not going to want to stop doing them, because you're just going to get good at it. It's going to build your capacity to serve your community, to diversify the work you're doing. Anyway, I'm sure David could add some other examples, but it is something I think we could all do better. Communication is one thing we could always all do better on, in both formally, after action, and otherwise.
Yeah, and one of the key things is having knowledge of what you're doing and how you're affecting these units. If you can thoroughly explain that to the tenants, because all they believe in the things that they can see. And we always know the things that they can't see affect them more directly than the things that they can see. And when you go into those units and you talk to those tenants, they have issues beyond what we're doing. And that's not what they want to talk to you about. They want to talk to you about the hole in the wall. They want to talk to you about the cabinet falling off the wall. And you can't dismiss those things. You can't just simply say to them, "Oh, I'm not, that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm worried about." So you have to be concerned about things like that. And they take that to heart. And when you say, "Hey, I can't address this to you specifically, but I can pass this information on for you." And they really appreciate just the small things like that.
Yeah, I'll add another brief anecdote. We went into it was an elderly property, and during our initial walkthrough, we identified a leak around the toilet, and it hadn't been addressed to the property management, but we took it upon ourselves to go ahead and contain the leak and then stop it, and then inform property maintenance to take a closer look to make sure that it's prevented. But those little things really add up.
Absolutely.
So I've got two more questions for this section, and I'm not sure that it's not necessarily a rapid fire, but I would like to hear from as many of you as possible from both CETA and CHP. But briefly, so what's one piece of advice you'd give to a subgrantee launching their first multifamily project to ensure that it has a lasting impact? And I'll start with the CETA folks first.
I touched on some of this. I think assessing your capacity is huge. That you have to approach it realistically. If you look at your portfolio of what you need to get spent for the year. If you have $100,000 and you think you're going to do, X amount of single family in addition to a multifamily property, and do you have the team that's ready to do it? Are you going to be able to project manage that multifamily on top of other single family commitments? And so your capacity, your relationships with your own team, that are you in a good spot? Is this a good time to take this on? But then again, with your contractors, with property owners and managers, those would be those two things, I'd say.
David.
I would say go into this open-minded. Don't feel intimidated. When you go into it and you expect success, you will be successful. That's one thought of advice I can give.
I like that. I like that a lot. CHP. One piece of advice you give to a subgrantee launching their first multifamily project.
I would suggest having a subject matter expert, regardless of who that is, who can over communicate with the property and with your internal staff to make sure that expectations are being met.
Like that.
I would say from the audit side of things, build a strong relationship with the maintenance staff and the project management team. The first one, we kind of, just real quick, we went through, we did a actual modeling audit. Then we turned around and we're like, oh, well, let's do this one with priority list. And we're like, okay, so we have to go get these pieces of information. That was the kind of the first property when I went back that everyone was welcoming. Like, you figure going back to for the second time, they're going to be like, oh no, here they come again. And the property management, the maintenance staff, they were all so welcoming, all the residents. And that was kind of the time where it's like, okay, it's clicking for the way we built that relationship kind of clicked for the kind of the way we were going about things.
I like it. Megan.
I had a couple of thoughts. My first thought is it's not rocket surgery. Multifamily is doable. Any agency can find the capacity to do multifamily. It is not a unicorn. If you want to do it, there are ways to do it. I would just say, don't limit yourself. You could be an agency that has one locality that has 2 people in the entire weatherization like office. You can still do multifamily. There's a way to do it. And I would encourage any and everyone, if you're interested, don't let it, it is not rocket surgery. I promise. Like it can be done. It's not a magical unicorn. You just have to take the steps. And it can be done.
And I can attest to that because there was once upon a time where I was a one-man team doing multifamily. So
I love it. I love it. Okay. And our last question for this section, again, I'd like to go around the whole panel for this. And we'll start with CHP and then move to CETA. If you could go back to your very first multifamily weatherization project, what would you do differently and why?
Pick a smaller property. I think the first property we went to was around 100 units. It was overwhelming, and I think some of the communication issues, maybe the planning issues on the audit end is where I'm speaking to. I think it was a little overwhelming, and I think, yeah, if I was to do it all over again, I'd love to start on like a 20 unit property, and I think that's a better way to jump in instead of, it's like jumping in the deep end of the pool when you can't swim.
Yeah. Yeah, Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say internal communication. With CHP, we had multiple different departments, and just transitioning between them from intake to auditing and auditing to production, just being able to communicate everything that's going on, who to contact at the property, that would make projects run a whole lot more smoothly here.
That's a good call. Megan?
Trying to think to the first one I was actually responsible for. I would say, gosh, there's so many things I would, again, better communication, have a better plan. I don't think we had a good plan the first time around. We were kind of, again, when I was responsible for it, we were winging it. We were getting it done and it was good, but we were totally winging it. So I would say, like, come together, even if it's your 2-person team or if you're a 1-man team like David was, even writing down what you would want your plan to look like. What do you define this property or weatherizing this property? What does success look like for you? So just having a plan, and over communicate.
Absolutely. CETA.
So
Same question.
I'll think back to my first project. This was out in Western Alaska. And while we did recruit in the building science expert, we did recruit in the state office. I think it was, we had a lot of communication on the front end and then some kind of ad hoc calls. I think I would have done what we do now and kind of schedule out like, all right, we're going to check in on this project a couple times formally and kind of more formally ask, hey, listen, will you kind of stick with us during the duration? It's our first one, we're capacity building. Can we plan for you to come back out maybe midway through? And I think just anticipate those points of contact earlier on in the project and schedule it in. Just, it's okay to not know everything. And it's okay to admit that. Kind of going back to what Megan was saying earlier, to really encourage yourself, just do it. Like, just go after it. But also don't get in over your head and pretend like you do it all yourself. Like, it's okay to phone a friend and get someone on the hook to communicate with throughout your first multifamily project journey.
Like that, David.
yeah. So for me, weatherization is a one-time shot for our clients and the people that we deal with. Let's get it right, and let's get it right because we only have one shot. Looking back to my very first multifamily, our budget was $4,000 per unit. That was the maximum amount we could spend. And you didn't always have the opportunity to address all the measures that needed to be taken care of. So where we are today, I think is just amazing. Look at every measure and get it right. And once you do that, you know you've done your best. So just do your best.
I like it. Okay. Thank you all. We've got about 9 minutes left in our scheduled time. I would like to open it up if attendees have some questions for our panelists.
We do
And-
have one question that went unanswered, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
It was from our roundtable one, those questions, and it was from Linda Timbers. She said, how do you get the landlord to help with uncooperative tenants? Can they make it mandatory? We've had tenants who won't provide income docs nor utility bills.
Good question. Any takers?
I would say, so again, currently we're using properties on the USDA HUD list, so we don't have to get that income documentation. But we've relied on the property management, and they have been able to get that income documentation, work with the residents to get what we needed. You know, we've had issues with getting, I mean, everybody's talked a little bit about getting into units. You know, a lot of times, you know, property management will just go to the door and say, this is part of your lease agreement. You know, you are required to let us in. And if you have a flat out refusal, you may be able to, again, kind of going back to that 67%, you might be able to just bypass that one, if you get the rest of them. If you're in a position where you have to have that one, in order to get to 67%, again, I would lean on the property managers. They know their clients, and, you know, help you get that information.
Yeah. Cede, anything to add?
We have passed on a unit before. We did everything in our power to try to serve them. We weren't getting anywhere without getting law enforcement involved. It wasn't worth it. It was like, look, we're let's just pass on this one. It didn't affect the overall project. Sure, it reduced our spend a little bit, but we still were compliant with the project. Wasn't the end of the world. We were able to serve the rest of the shell. So that's a simple way of doing it, but it could be consequence if that threshold drops, for example. So yeah, I think that's probably, it's okay to pass when you need to.
Yeah. Any other questions in the chat? Otherwise, I'll go back to some of our outstanding.
Chase, Daniel Huber has his hand raised. I guess
Oh, yeah.
give him time to speak.
Yeah, please.
We have to unmute him. I don't know. Let me see.
Trying to get his mic to work.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, you could if you can't get it to work, Daniel, can you he just wanted to touch base on the need for a tracking board.
That's a great question.
Oh no, go ahead. He made a comment just a few minutes ago that said, suggestion I've not heard, use a wall mounted board for tracking the entire project and current status.
Yeah, what are some tracking tools that you guys use, whether physical or digital?
For CETA's single family work, we stood up Monday.com as a good project management tracking tool. It's very easy to stand up. It's relatively low cost. It's used for a lot of different things, and it's worked pretty well for single family. Multifamily, we don't track our projects as much in that, but our volume is also a lot higher. So I think if you were looking at just an approachable piece of software, well, it's not a wall on the board, that works too. Monday.com has been okay for us.
Yeah, second for Monday. Jesse's been advocating it for years, and Greenbound just adopted it earlier this year. It's been great. Megan, anything at CHP?
Yeah, I think I saw Doug in the comments. if all else fails, Excel. Honestly, I mean, we're in weatherization. That's what we do. We just make a new Excel spreadsheet. I mean, that's what we do in weatherization. I mean, again, you don't have to have a fancy software. You can have a board up on a wall and track a project. Yeah, CHP, like Sita said, they, have Monday. We use Dynamics for single family. Jesse had a big hand in that as well. But you can use a very simple tool. You don't even have to use a tool. Like, you have a board on a wall to track your progress, put time frames, timelines, or, again, Excel. You don't have to have a special software to do it.
Okay. If there are no other questions at the moment, I've got maybe one final question in the last couple of minutes that we have access to. This is back from Learning Objective 1, outlining key steps and documentation required to launch a multifamily weatherization project. And, let's tee it up for either CETA or CHP. What are some techniques learned along the way that sets up a project for success at the closeout stage? And this is could be early on in the process. Loaded question.
I think Stephanie and I were actually, I think we were talking about this question earlier yesterday because we were kind of reviewing it. And I was like, I'm not really sure how to answer that. But I think, I mean, as silly as it may sound, like how you store your files. I mean, just electronic files, like, does each unit get its own electronic file, and are all the necessary pieces of documentation input into that file? Or if you use paper files, making sure every unit has its own paper file. That's for us. Again, it might be somebody else might do it completely different, but for us, that has really helped when we get to close out and when we have to true up, make sure we're billing correct materials and things like that. Because we have to upload the QCI documents for every single individual unit. So again, even something just as small as making sure your documentation is stored appropriately, whether it be electronic or, paper, and that, the folks that need access to that have easy access to it as you're working on closeout for the project. Did I miss anything, Stephanie?
Nope, you got it all.
Okay. Well, I think in the interest of time, to make sure we wrap up on time, I'll make a plug for NCAP. Make sure to subscribe to Weatherization Plus and follow them on their social media. Download the 2025 Energy Awareness Month Toolkit. These are all available on the website, NCAP's website as well. And some contact information for the great panelists here. I'd like to thank you all so much for pulling this together. For folks in the attendees may not know that I pulled them all together. They were very generous with their time just in the last, 8-9 days. So this was an amazing, I think, I hope everybody got a lot out of this. I know I did. And now we'll make a plug right now. Session 6 is on managing and closing out your first project. That's scheduled for November 6th, same time. And we will hope to see you all there. And I think we're good. Keisha, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Chase. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and a big, huge thank you again to all of the presenters. And remember that today's roundtable discussion, it reminded us that multifamily weatherization it's not about buildings, it's about people. And every project brings safer, more efficient homes to families who need it most. So one plug as we celebrate Energy Awareness Month, and we look forward to Weatherization Day on October 30th. If you guys have any kind of events, please reach out to NCAP at the energy at communityactionpartnership.com. Email me and let us know what's going on. We would love to pay a visit and be boots on the ground and join you in celebrating Weatherization Day. Thank you again for joining us, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.